recovery for all, and it is our privilege to provide help and recovery for problem gamblers and affected others as part of a long-term partnership with GamCare, and that's funded by GambleAware. This year we'll see around about 1,000 problem gamblers and affected others in the southwestern Wales. We'll see 700 young people being trained in education and awareness around gambling problems, and we will have trained over 1,000 professionals to be able to give advice to young people. I'm delighted to co-host this webinar today with Terry. He's the chair of the Gambling Harms North West Alliance, and we'll see him in a minute. I'm delighted to say we've got over 300 people registered to attend today's event, and we've had over 3,000 views for the conference. We've got a very full agenda, packed with brilliant speakers. Just to let you know that we are recording the event, and it will be available on the Beacon Counselling Trust website with links sent to you via Everbright. I'm now going to ask our good friend and supporter, Sir Mark Hendrick, MP, to open the conference and say a few words. Thanks, Mark. There seems to be a bit of a technical hitch with Mark at the moment. So what I intend to do is to move on and introduce you to Neil Platt, who is the clinical director of Beacon Counselling Trust, to set the scene for the conference and set the landscape of the issues facing affected others. Neil.
Morning, Graham. Morning, everyone. Sorry about that small hiccup. For the first time ever, we're recognising that these affected others have a real story to tell. They are so often the forgotten ones in this arena, but today they're being given a voice, and no amount of statistics can set the scene better than us listening to our lived experience speakers. And lived experience is at the heart of this webinar this morning. International evidence indicates that gambling harm created by one individual can negatively affect between 6 and 10 people, dependent upon the severity of the problem, i.e., the lower the severity, generally speaking, the lower the numbers affected. However, the research around the subject has received quite little attention, both in the UK and internationally, when compared to the subject of the gambler themselves. Today, the aim is to change this and to make a fresh start with this sometimes forgotten group. So looking at what we already know, in our opinion, it is significant and sufficient enough to do something now. Not to delay, procrastinate, or kick into the long grass for more research. That would support a group that, despite accessing gambling support services in considerable numbers, who, in our opinion, whose needs are most clearly not met. In order to validate my observation that we know enough about the impact of gambling harms on the wider family unit, let's just reflect for a moment about what we do know. Let's begin with the fact that the UK has the highest rate of family instability amongst the developed world. And I wonder why this is. I'm sure people would say it's complex, but could one of the complexities be its link with gambling generally in the UK and specifically the impact of gambling-related harms. I'm not quite sure if many of you have seen this, but according to a new report from the University of Oxford, in 2018, about 220,000 people spent over £1,800 a month on gambling, with additionally another 1.9 million people spending between £150 to £1,800 a month. Quite startling figures when you relate the fact that the average disposable household income in the UK was less than £2,500 per month. So my question is, are we missing a link here? In 2018, 140,000 parents split up, costing society an amazing 51 billion, and for which we make no link with gambling-related harm or the millions of people affected by it. To compound this, I wonder how this will be impacted on with the recently declared record loss of 614 million by players in December, up 71 million from October. I wonder how this will be impacted once this is felt, and probably only increasing during our journey with COVID. I'll also leave you to ponder or maybe reflect on a number of other statistics from a wider harms perspective, in that research indicates that about 37% of individuals displaying harmful gambling report being the perpetrators of intimate partner violence, often referred to as IPV, and this often involves children. More worrying within the family unit is that the children of harmful gambling parents, in particular, are also at risk from up to 14 more times of developing gambling problems themselves. So from an intergenerational perspective, we've got a problem here. With some academics calling addiction a family disease, and in a world full of disease modelling as we currently have, are we ignoring this one? And staying on the subject of children, what will we action from a recent report that says approximately 160,000 children aged 11 to 16 reported losing sleep at night because they are worried about an immediate family member and their gambling? Will we ignore this too? These are such massive problems for a family unit to engage with, especially when the family unit paradoxically becomes both a major risk and protective factor in the recovery journey of the disordered or pathological gambler. To finish, I would like to conclude with 2 points. Firstly, it's the issue of the link between disordered or pathological gambling and criminality. In my experience, I've seen few individuals who've met this diagnostic criteria and not have been involved in criminality. And these individuals, once convicted, are often subject to a confiscation order against their realisable assets. Unfortunately, as gamblers in these situations are normally spent up, the only realisable asset here is the family home. Thus, all too frequently in my experience, the family home and the family becomes an additional victim of the criminal behaviour of the gambler. And the family is often completely unaware until some devastating paperwork arrives. Our groundbreaking work with the Howard League and its commission on the relationship between problem gambling and criminality in the UK is endeavouring to make change in this regard, as families most clearly feel they are found guilty and punished for a crime they knew nothing about, often carrying the legacy for years to come. Maybe society needs to reflect and ask, are they guilty by association, and should they be punished too? To close, I just want to raise the issue of suicide as the most catastrophic issue a family can experience. With various estimates from organisations such as Gambling With Lives indicating that up to 650 gambling-related suicides every year in the UK, we're still some way away from a national family support system here. We've not only been slow to pick this up, but slower in engaging with the phenomenon of those affected by suicide, moving on to develop harmful gambling behavior or a disorder and bring the relationship of these two together. Two combined issues that can devastate the family unit for years to come. So that's really it from me. I just wanted to give a snapshot into the wider gambling harms arena and the impacts of. Some no doubt obvious to you, others may not be so. But I hope it's been useful, and I hope you really enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for setting the scene for us. Now, a bit about the history of the Gambling Harms North West Alliance. I'm going to introduce you to my co-host, Terry Kilgareth, who's going to talk a little bit about the background to the Alliance and then to introduce some of our expert speakers. Thanks, Terry.
Thanks for that, Graham. Good morning, everyone. My name's Terry Kilgareth, and I'm the proud chairman of Gambling Harms North West Alliance. Now, the Gambling Harms North West Alliance was formed over 2 years ago as a group of recovering gamblers and affected others joined together with Beacon Counselling Trust in bringing about and how to, we recognise the need for change and have focused our efforts in bringing about and how to affect this change. We then formed a wider alliance to include Lancashire and South Cumbria NHS Foundation Trust, Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, and our own BAME community support team. I now have the honour and privilege to introduce 4 of our 21 members. We could have included siblings, friends, associates, or work colleagues, but decided to focus on the people who will give you the widest perspective of gambling harms. So firstly, please welcome Nicola, as well as being our lead on affected others. Nicola is the ex-partner of a problem gambler who, although no longer living with the family, is still responsible for the harm to Nicola and her children years after. Welcome, Nicola.
Thanks, Terry, and good morning, everybody. The question, how did you not know? You must have known something wasn't right. But if I'm to turn that question back around, can you even begin to imagine how it feels to discover one of the most, if not the most important person in your life? Someone you've lived with, you've loved, you've confided in and you've trusted. Your best friend, your husband, has been suffering with a hidden addiction, a gambling addiction. The immediate questions for me were, in fact, how and where do we get help? Him help. What about our children? And can we pay our mortgage? The landscape of emotions is vast. There's the guilt for having not known, feeling you failed as a wife for not helping in his suffering, shame, despair, heartbreak, and betrayal. And for a time, none of that felt real. I had no idea what a gambling disorder was, its components, its complexities, but now looking back, no armour, no preparation for the devastating consequences it would wreak on our everyday family life. The assumption amongst the masses, as it was mine, he would just want help. For those of us associated with gambling harms, the reality and the understanding is so very different. The task can be great, and sometimes it's too great. Talking from experience, Google at 3 a.m. does not assist you. That initial discovery back in 2017 was a shock. but to label our life in the aftermath a trauma would be an understatement. I was 32, broke and broken, left alone with a 4 and a 2-year-old to support. Our family debt was in the region of more than £150,000. It is in that trauma the affected others are just left to keep calm and carry on, whilst desperately searching for every scrap of information that might help. The truth is, you're left riding a roller coaster you've never asked to get on. And it's not just a result of your loved one's addiction, but because the systems, the establishment the family immediately turn to help them get off are the very same ones who keep you firmly strapped in. What you're left with is a first-class ticket to sit beside a loved one whilst they're given passage to hit self-destruct, feeling powerless, hopeless, and with no control to stop it. Therapy can help with this process, and it was Beacon actually who assisted me in that time. But there remained so many other questions, practical, everyday challenges. And every time I asked, but where do I go now? Who can I speak to about this? The response was always the same. We understand, but there's no recognition in our services. We have a due process. GDPR is a nightmare. I couldn't even cancel a television subscription, let alone access bank accounts or hold necessary conversations to discuss the real problems our family was facing. Navigating finances is a minefield. Court systems, legal aid doesn't take into consideration debt, family orders to bankruptcy, the abuse. Never mind the toll that this all takes on your physical health and well-being. It made me ill, very ill. Recovery gateways have come a long way, but there are still a number of us left locked outside of them, and it's not for want of trying. It was a text message, not from my husband, but a payday loan company, that finally alerted me to the events that have come to define the last 3 years plus of mine and my family's life. More than 30% of our monthly income, dating back years, had been lining the pockets of the bookmakers. And that was before the extensive line of credit. The banks, the credit card, the loan companies hadn't flagged a thing. All our mail had been burnt. A paperless trail and a web of email accounts. Gambling harms tears through the most hardened of people and the strongest of families. And what it leaves is a catastrophic mop-up others simply cannot comprehend. And then there is the resentment and a total injustice of the circumstances to work through. Today, talking to you, I don't know if my children and I are able to keep our home. Owing to bankruptcy laws, never mind the fact I've been paying my mortgage monthly since all this began, I am subject to an occupational rent. How can that be right? And had you asked me 5 years ago what my family life was like, I could have looked you straight in the eyes and told you how wonderful we had it. Good careers, a stable and healthy income, goals and ambitions, a nice home, and 2 beautiful children. The reality of gambling harms. Possessions down to our household Hoover had been bought on credit. We didn't own our television. Money had no value. It was nothing but a fuel for an addiction that was so deeply entrenched. There's no manual, no directory for rebuilding your life from the bottom up. It's isolating, and at a time when you're also dissecting your entire life's existence between reality and fallacy. It's a cruel place to be, but sadly, it's a far too common occurrence. And it's because the rest of the world is still only catching on to the real horrors of how this addiction manifests in what is a frightfully ever-growing industry. While you're waiting for your loved one to reach their rock bottom, the affected others are left to unpick and restitch relationships, take on new roles, all the finances, work, and the labour of life. There's no assistance in that task. And at every turn, you're working against an establishment set up to exploit that further. Debt can continue being accrued and sought and accrued, and with an appetite and an open menu 24 hours a day. There's no stopping it. The issue of gambling harms only grows bigger. From the industry to the financial institutions, even to the heart of our very legal system, we are just the collateral damage. Therapy is simply not enough. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola. I think that's a very powerful story, and it says that, I mean, it's brilliant. And we've got Anna Hemming speaking later, who's CEO of GamCare, and they've been fantastic in enabling partners like Beacon and ARA to be able to provide therapy services and help for talking therapies for people affected by another's problem gambling. But there's so much more than therapy. There's all the practical issues that Nicola outlined, and I think it's time to it's time for us to be innovative and think about how we can help people get out of the issues that they're left with, and also to safeguard everybody going forward, really, because it's, we do know that being the child of a problem gambler is an indicator of having a gambling issue yourself. So if we can protect families from the harms caused by gambling, we're building a safety net for the future. So thanks very much, Nicola. I'm delighted to say that Sir Mark Hendrick, MP for Preston, has joined us after a bit of a technical difficulty, and I'm now going to ask him to say a few words. Mark's been a keen supporter of the Alliance, and he's a good friend of ours. So over to you, Mark.
Great. Well, thanks very much for the invitation to attend this important conference. I want to say a little bit about the work that's going on in Parliament in order to deal with gambling-related harm. We've developed a robust programme to include meetings and evidence sessions with children, gambling and advertising. We also include public health issues, research, education and prevention and treatment. We've looked at the issues of gambling and suicide, women and gambling and the black market. And only last week I added my name to a letter regarding the sponsorship of daytime television programmes by gambling companies, and are calling on ITV to end these sponsorship arrangements without delay. End gambling advertising and sponsorship in football. I've also added my name to that. And only yesterday we had a discussion in the all-party group about gambling and football, where we had Peter Shilton and his wife discussing the problems that they've been through with the gambling issue. And we have a number of policy asks in Parliament. The all-party group has been asking for a final report as part of its online gambling harm inquiry, and suggested a number of recommendations. And these should form the basis of the all-party group's asks, where we're now considering a new gambling or changes to the gambling legislation. We're asking for stake limits for online slot content of no higher than £2, giving the potential to cause harm. We're asking for a ban on all VIP schemes and inducements. These schemes are highly profitable for gambling companies, offering very high stakes gambling, and they continue to lead to significant harm. We're asking for a ban on all gambling advertising. We want to see a complete overhaul of gambling regulation in the UK, and we believe that the Gambling Commission is not fit for purpose. We want an urgent review of stakes, deposit and prize limits online, as well as a complete review and classification of online products. We want to look at affordability limits, which are set and imposed by the Gambling Commission. We would like to see a gambling ombudsman for consumer redress, so people can come back at some of the gambling companies. And we want a mandatory smart levy paid by gambling operators to fund independent research, education, prevention and treatment. The new Gambling Act, while some immediate changes can be made through secondary legislation, the government should consider what changes can be made in the short term, i.e. an overhaul of the 2005 Gambling Act is required and needs to be made fit for the digital age. In terms of my work in Parliament, I've attended the summer adjournment debate and raised this issue. And I said at the time, I want to speak about gambling, not just by adults, but by young kids and children. I was hearing about kids with mobile phones who have their parents' credit cards and are playing and gambling during lessons, gambling large sums of money, thousands of pounds, in many cases of their parents' money. The Gambling Commission tells us that 55,000 11 to 16-year-olds have serious gambling addictions. The country's in a mess. We have a Prime Minister and a new government. Let's see what they can deal with it and whether they can deal with it. I've also asked a series of parliamentary questions to the Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, which has the gambling portfolio. And of course, the key to all this is new legislation, and we're partway through the Gambling Act review. And I'm looking forward to seeing all those consultations taken seriously by the government by the time that they look forward to closing that evidence session on the 31st of March this year. So things are moving. They're not moving quickly enough for my liking, but things are moving. And certainly where I can lend my weight to the fight against gambling harm, I will do. Thank you very much for inviting me to attend this prestigious conference. And I look forward to speaking with you again in the future. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mark. Thank you for attending today, and thank you for keeping us up to date with what's going on in Parliament. I'd like now to introduce you to our next speaker, Anna Hemmings, who's the Chief Exec of GamCare. And as I said, Beacon and Ara are long-term trusted partners of GamCare, and we've been. It's brilliant that GamCare have been so forward-thinking in allowing us to provide services to those people that are affected by another's gambling. That's so rare. I know I've known Anna for a long time, and we've worked in the drug and alcohol field, and to be able to provide services, funded services for people affected by somebody else's problem is I think pretty unique, and it's great to be part of that system. So over to you, Anna.
Hello there, and thanks, Graham, and thanks for having me today. I just wanted to start by going back to Nicola, really, who just gave us the most incredibly eloquent description of how gambling can impact on families. And, she said more than I could ever say about that in some ways. And as Graham said, I've worked in addictions for many years, and one thing that I think is quite unique to gambling is that it's more common that gambling impacts on the security of your family home. We see that less in drug and alcohol users. And if the security of your home's impacted, quite often that's the very foundation of your life being undermined. And that is a very, very difficult thing. So what are we doing at GamCare? GamCare has been around for nearly 25 years now, and we operate the National Gambling Helpline, which is available 24 hours a day, year round. And alongside that, we offer treatment both directly and via a network of partners around the country. And of course, lots of them are on this call. Beacon and Ara are two of them. And in terms of what we see on the helpline, although the majority of callers are gamblers themselves, about 25% are affected by somebody else's gambling. And within that group, about 80% of the affected family calling are women. Now, 25% doesn't sound like a lot, and it's certainly not as many callers as we'd like, but it's still around 8,000 people a year, which I think is quite a significant amount. And on the helpline, we'll talk through both practical and emotional issues. So in a practical sense, we'll talk through what steps can be taken to improve the safety of the family and the security of the family, and possibly limit access to gambling where it can be done. And then equally, we'll talk about the emotional impacts, which Nicola's described so well earlier, and they are very broad, and you know, for lots of families, there'll be impacts on both partners and children and wider networks as well. Our treatment services do see affected others too, so people can come forward for treatment. But I think across the board, one of the issues is the huge amount of stigma that's connected to this. The lack of awareness about gambling as an issue, the lack of investment in gambling support and treatment services more widely. We're not having the national conversation about gambling in the way that we should be. And I think if we were, it would just help begin to remove some of the difficulty in coming forward for help and support that people experience. Part of the issue there is that it's not just our services that need to do that. So other professionals could benefit from asking a question about gambling if people go to the GP or citizens advice or other services. That's growing, and certainly there's some specialist support via citizens advice. But if all professionals had that awareness and were asking, I think again it would just make it easier for people to come forward. Of particular concern at the moment is the impact of the pandemic. On the National Gambling Helpline, we're receiving now about the same number of calls as we would usually. But one significant impact that we've seen throughout this last year is that the number of affected others calling us has dropped. But in that same period, the nature of those calls has become more severe. We're seeing people in a greater degree of crisis than we did previously. We're seeing more distress, we're seeing more domestic abuse. So we're incredibly concerned that people aren't coming forward during the pandemic. And that has been seen across all help seeking. All services have seen a drop in people coming forward for treatment or support or help. But this has particularly affected others. So we are looking at ways that we can reach out and publicise and promote both the helpline and the treatment network, particularly to families and significant others who are affected by someone's gambling. So whilst we've got a job of work to do, there is support available on a 24-hour basis, and it's really important that we get the word out about that and encourage people to come forward wherever possible, but in a bigger sense that we encourage the conversation about gambling to be much more extensive, both in professional settings and in homes, in families and in communities, so that people don't get to that level of crisis before they come forward to us. Thanks very much. I think that's it from me.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Anna. I think that's really good to say about the GamCare services. Just a quick reflection from me. GamCare get around, I think it's around £7 million for providing the 24-hour helpline and treatment with its in London and the provider network and the partner network, and that's for the whole of Great Britain. I just wanted to give a reflection of where I operate in the southwest. Bristol, the CCG area for Bristol, the Clinical Commissioning Group area, the NHS area for Bristol, for drug and alcohol addiction services, gets about £6 million, and that's not enough. So I think Anna and her team and the partner network do a fantastic job with limited resources and for the coverage that we get. So I just think I wanted to use those numbers not as a way of saying that it's unfair against drug and alcohol services, because it isn't. There needs to be more investment. There's been a disinvestment in addiction services across the piece, but for what funds and resources the gambling treatment network gets, I think is just stark contrast. So thanks for that, Anna. I'm going to pass you over to Terry now, who's going to introduce our next speaker with lived experience.
Yeah, thanks, Graham, and thanks, Anna and Sir Mark. Very, very welcome comments on both parts. I'd like now to introduce to you a lady called Jackie. She's one of our group, and she has she's the mother of a problem gambler, and she's recently had to, unfortunately, evict her son for her own safety and for the safety of her family. But I'll introduce it and let her explain her story. Thank you, Jackie.
Thanks, Terry. I'm here to talk to you today about the impact of gambling harms on myself and my family. It's important for everyone to acknowledge, whatever I say to you today, it will never truly be enough to reflect the significant impact gambling harms has had on our lives. It's also important for me that you know my son is not a bad person. He's funny, he's intelligent, he's hardworking, and he's a very skilled sportsman. My son is 23 years old and is a compulsive gambler. He is not in recovery. In early 2019, he came to me very stressed about some money he owed. I'd already suspected something was wrong as he never had any money, call it mother's intuition. I knew he didn't earn very much, £795 a month. This is important to note. As I began to unravel his financial situation, I discovered he'd been allowed to take out 4 payday loans totaling £2,500. His bank had also given him an overdraft of £1,250, far and above his monthly income. My son told me he was trying to keep up with friends, with nights out, with new clothes and paying for his car. That's why he'd taken out the loans, and I believed him. My husband and I agreed to pay all the debt, and my son agreed to pay us back a little bit every month. It wasn't until a few months later we discovered his drug use, alcohol misuse, and finally his gambling addiction. This coming to light after we found out about a £900 phone bill he'd run up gambling online. In September 2019, his debt was approximately £6,500 that we knew of. He was living with us in the family home, and we sought help from Addaction regarding his drug and alcohol abuse, and we were also referred to GA. Our life as a family became chaotic and stressful. We couldn't understand how my son could hold down a responsible job, yet live such a chaotic lifestyle outside of work. We became prisoners in our own home, unable to leave our son alone in the house without someone being there. We resorted to locking alcohol in the shed at the bottom of the garden. All spare cash was hidden. Anything with financial information had to be shredded or locked away. All electronic gadgets were removed from the house. Passwords and passcodes for mobile phones kept confidential. At one point, we even had to cancel all our credit and bank cards. We had one bank card between us, which was cancelled every time there was a suspicion he gained access to it. For 15 long months, I slept with one eye open, always listening out for him sneaking around the house. He used to sneak down to the lounge in the middle of the night to get online via the smart TV to gamble. We even had to lock away the TV remote control. My son's engagement with GA was on and off. He did not fully participate in the programme, only paying lip service to us, the family. It was from here we became involved with Gam-Anon, attending every week, even when my son would not. We did not realise at the time, but this support was a lifesaver for us. Over the months, his character changed. He became more and more aggressive, the less opportunity he had to gamble, drinking more and more, and always trying to find his next way to gamble online. I asked my son to leave the family home many times, only each time to allow him back. As a mother, it broke my heart. I literally invested my life into saving my son. My marriage was suffering, and the close relationships with my daughter became strained. Everyone could see what was happening to me, the manipulation, the coercion, the enabling, me getting sucked in and disappearing into the life of a gambler. As a mother of a compulsive gambler, it is not easy to let you in and tell you these things about my son. It is not easy for me to tell you that I think somehow I failed to fix him. My job is to protect my son at all costs, isn't it? But what does that mean? At what cost? Does it mean my life, my mental health? Does it mean my marriage, financial ruin, losing a career I've worked so hard and many years to achieve? Does it cost my friendships, my own freedoms, Does it mean losing my self-respect? How, as a mother, can you choose? It's an impossible ask. You can't walk away from your child. You just can't. They are biology. They are part of you. My meltdown came in May 2020. After months of lying, literally wrapping my son up in cotton wool, at his beck and call 24 hours a day, telling lies for him and hiding things from my husband and family, it came to a head. Struggling with lockdown and after a heavy period of drinking, one evening my son's violence reached new heights. It led to a physical altercation between my son and his stepdad, with my son smashing things up in my house. My daughter was left hiding upstairs behind her locked bedroom door, another measure to stop my son, who'd been searching in there for anything he could steal, sell or use. It was during this particular violent outburst my son turned on me. Not physically, but I was instead subject to the most shocking form of verbal abuse, in which he called me scum for not helping him when he needed me the most. I was devastated and angry beyond words. I'm not proud of the things I said to my son that night, but I'd reached the end of the line. I'd given up so much of my life to look after and support him. I was heartbroken. This was our turning point. My son was asked to leave the family home. He was homeless in a pandemic. When I look back to this, I can't fully comprehend what happened. All those months it had come to this. What mother evicts her son from his home in his darkest hour and in the middle of a pandemic? My son is now settled and living in a house share. He works full time and does well at his job. His boss is aware of his gambling addiction, but my son is a closed book. He will not openly discuss anything. He's currently on the waiting list for an assessment for ADHD. He's been waiting 13 months. I see him regularly, 2 to 3 times a week. I need to see my son. I need to know he's okay. I need to know he's still alive. There is still the worry, a moment every day, I think. Will today be the day the police knock on my door? And I still cry for my son every day. I still support him, and in some ways, I know I still enable him. I manage his bank account, I pay his bills, so I know exactly where and what his money is spent on. Each payday comes around, and each payday he owes someone money and has no money left for food. And each month I buy him food. That's what mothers do, right? My son has taken no responsibility for his debt. In September 2019, with support from Terry, I wrote to all his debtors. In fact, I wrote to them all 3 times. Eventually, a long time later, only 2 companies responded. My son has no idea how much money he owes, and I dread to think what damage has been done since he left. Life in our family home is very slowly picking up the pieces, and we're trying to rebuild our lives. This may sound very dramatic to some, but until you've lived with a compulsive gambler, you just can't comprehend the damage it can do to your life. Only now, looking back, can I see how much life was sucked out of me. I said so many times, I might as well be the compulsive gambler. Life at home is better. We can sleep for a start. Nothing is locked away. However, I do not trust my son. We are always on alert when he comes round. I watch him like a hawk when he leaves to make sure nothing has been taken. Imagine doing that every time your son comes to visit you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you. I mean, again, I think both Jackie and Nicola have been extremely eloquent in their description of what it's like to be an affected other. And what's coming out for me again is both got and brilliantly so. Both folk have had some emotional support from different agencies, actually, Nicola at Beacon and Jackie at Gamenon. But there's all the practical issues that go alongside the talking therapies, and I think it's really imperative that we think about innovation going forward. So thank you very much. We've now got a video of our next speaker, Tony Clarkson from the Victorian Responsible Gambling Foundation, and that's so we're now getting one of two international perspectives. So we'll listen to Tony. Thank you.
My name's Tony Clarkson. I'm the Principal Clinical Advisor at the Victorian Responsible Gambling Foundation here in Melbourne, Australia. I've been invited to talk at the Guilty by Association conference by Neil and the team at Beacon. Thanks very much for the invite, Neil, and thanks very much for all the fantastic work that you and the team do for people experiencing harm from gambling across the northwest of England. We fully support all the work you do here from Australia, and we'd really love to be involved in anything you do in the future in terms of research or any other support that we can offer. I'm here really to talk about Affected Others, to introduce a video that we developed as an educational tool to explain to community about the kind of harms associated with affected others, not just gamblers. So I'm going to show the video now, and then after that I'll talk a little bit about the harms associated with affected others. First of all, I just want to look at the 7 dimensions of harm that we identified in a 2016 study we conducted. I'm sure you're familiar with most of these in the work that you do. They're up there on the screen, and we tried to cover off most of these, not all of them, but most of them in the video. There's also the concept of temporal categories in terms of legacy harms, so harms that are longer standing, more entrenched. Crisis harms that appear immediately and need to be addressed immediately. And then general harms which are, I suppose, across broader spectrum. So we'll have a look at the video, and then after that I'll look a little bit at some of the help and support that's available here.
My husband has a problem with gambling. I've given up trying to fix it. It's just what our life is now. Sometimes I feel like I'm stuck in a room and I can't get out.
My son gambles. I sometimes wonder if it's my fault. You know, was it something I did or maybe something I didn't do? It's affecting everything. Actually, I'm a bit embarrassed that it's got this bad.
My dad gambles a lot. He thinks I don't know about it, but I do. I've known something was going on for a while now. It's like I see my friends' parents and it's like a whole other world than mine. I mean, it's nothing special, it's just, I don't know, normal? I want normal.
My other kids don't say anything about it anymore. And it's not the kind of thing I discuss with friends. Well, everyone's got their own problems. I would like to think that my son could take control himself. No, it's not that simple. And gambling's everywhere you look these days.
I used to get my hopes up that things would change. I used to think we'd wake up one day and everything would be better. But I know it's not going to happen. I've thought about talking to Mum, but it's like, if I'm okay, then she's okay. But I know she's not. She's not okay.
The gambling makes life hard, but it's the loneliness that really gets to me. I don't want to talk to anyone else about it because I don't want anyone else to know. I know that he's hurting. I don't want to have to choose, but the kids have to be my number one priority.
authorised by the Victorian Responsible Gambling Foundation, Melbourne.
So, as you can see from the video, most of the harms in those 7 dimensions are covered off there. I want to look now at basically what kind of support is available for affected others here in Victoria. So we're quite fortunate that we have a significant amount of state government funding to provide support for people who are harmed by gambling, whether that's a gambler or an affected other. We have a local Gamblers Help Service that provides therapeutic and financial counselling and community engagement. Aboriginal services, because the Indigenous population here, as in other countries like New Zealand and Canada, are more adversely affected and have poorer health outcomes than the non-Indigenous population, and that's the same for gambling. And people who affected others and gamblers who are in the culturally and linguistically diverse communities are also more affected. What we know from research is that while they might not gamble as much as everyone else, we know that because of a lack of protective factors, that they experience much more harm. And we also run a number of lived experience peer support, telephone support programs as well. So who exactly is affected by this harm? Well, again, it won't be news to most of you guys, but the video hopefully tries to demonstrate that the majority of people who are affected are spouses or intimate partners, children, siblings, and other family members are also adversely affected. How do we know this? Well, we conducted another research study in 2017, and part of that developed a problem gambling significant other impact scale. And what that showed us was that for affected others of a problem gambler, their quality of life deteriorates somewhere between 10 and 36%. For affected others of a moderate risk gambler, it's about 33% and 17% for low risk gamblers. All of this is based on research, and like I said, the first piece that I would reference would be the piece from 2016, which looked at the kind of coping strategies that affected others put in place in terms of behaviour change. The probably most well-known piece from 2017, which identified that for every person affected by gambling, or for every gambler, sorry, 6 other people are affected by gambling. And then the Victorian Responsible Gambling Foundation conducted a harm study in 2016 where we identified those 7 domains of harm and also attempted a taxonomy of harms. And then finally, there's a new study about to come out this year that we funded, which looks at specifically the types of harms that are associated with affected others. So I'm hoping this has been useful. Thanks again to Neil and the team. Thanks again to all the work that Beacon does there. It's a fantastic programme and we'd love to support it as much as we can. Any questions, then please forward them on to me or Neil. And happy to share this presentation, happy to share any of our research materials. All the best. Enjoy the rest of the conference. It's Friday night here, so I'm off to my bed. Thanks.
Well, that was some insight into the work that goes on in Victoria in Australia. Just a quick reminder that after the event, everybody will be getting a link via the Eventbrite system, so that you will be able to see the webinar presentation in its entirety. It's being recorded, so just a quick reminder of that. I'm going to hand over to Terry now, who's going to introduce our next speaker.
Yeah, thanks, Graham, and yeah, very insightful from Australia. They seem to be somewhere ahead of us at the moment, but there's no reason why we can't pinch best practice. So I'm now going to introduce you to Spencer, and Spencer is the son of a problem gambler. So we're getting a totally different perspective here, but I'll let Spencer tell you his story now. So thank you, Spencer. I don't know if you need to unmute yourself, Spencer.
Not bad?
Yeah,
good.
We can hear you now.
Good. Yeah, so as Terry says, I'm here to talk about gambling from the view of the child of a gambler who required help this being my mum. So gambling can impact people from all walks of life, whether you're rich, poor, or anyone. And I do think it's important that everyone understands this point. And so I would like to begin by giving you some background on my own mum. So I'm from a family of 6, have 3 brothers, and grew up with both parents who worked very hard to provide a good life for their family. And all in all, we have good memories growing up and to date. My family background is fundamental. As for my mum, it had a massive impact on what led to her gambling. As when her 4 sons left home, this impacted her greatly when she was diagnosed with something called empty nest syndrome, as well as having both depression and anxiety, and she was hit very badly at this stage. It was here that she commenced gambling with scratch cards, and she became addicted to these to fill the day and fill the void from when her kids left home. And the gambling and all her other conditions spiraled very badly here. I remember on one occasion, a friend of the family said they had actually seen our mum down a back alley behind a shop, scratching feverishly away at scratch cards, which obviously wasn't very nice to hear. You know, she could have been in danger. She went from spending all of her time and pretty much every penny she had on us as kids. You know, we've got memories of her buying us all mountain bikes, computers growing up, and going without if needed, to then someone that must obtain money to gamble in any way possible. So it was a complete change. Sadly, she attempted suicide several times, and she actually had to be revived in front of myself and my father in the A&E department, which, as you can imagine, wasn't very nice to see. It was at the first attempt that she told the family that she had racked up significant debts from the gambling, and that this worry of the debts was the final straw leading to the suicide attempt. This was the first that we knew of the gambling. It was only later that we realised the complexities of gambling, her underlying conditions, and how they all interlinked and ultimately required professional help. And so naturally, the gambling continued beyond this point. I would add that her suicide attempts have also impacted her physical health too, whereby, as well as being in the A&E department when she attempted suicide, she is now under long-term care of the NHS for liver conditions and other matters. I have to say, I had already warned some of the medics and the carers of the risks of her attempting suicide. And whilst much of the care she received was excellent, and I'm always mindful that she didn't tell us everything, the bottom line is, I believe the overarching NHS and primary care could have done more had they looked at this more holistically. But obviously it would have been helped greatly if there was more funding and support available to the experts and the clinicians who try to help people such as my mum. It was only after the attempt that led to her being revived and me firmly highlighting my concerns that she eventually got the good mental health support and care, which made a big difference. The medics stated all her conditions combined made her case very complex to manage, thus only proving that professional help was indeed required. I explain her background as this shows that there can be underlying reasons leading to why someone gambles, and that these reasons can make the management of gambling very complex too. In terms of what has helped her stop gambling, the family ensure that she gets appropriate medical care. But again, I would stress that there does need to be more help and support in that area. In addition, one of the biggest positive impacts has been coming to Gambling Harms Northwest. At Preston, it's in a community hall that feels safe for my mum. So she's gone from someone that doesn't speak to almost being like the mum of the group, and certainly someone for the increasing number of women that come to the group to talk to. She looks forward to going, and we can see a spring in her step, which is good for us, and we now worry far less. and I would add that her medics support this too. Through attending this group, we all learn, we know it helps, and together we can support each other. We need to be sure that support is there for those that need it. If this wasn't there, we would always fear a lapse, leading to other risks and other complications. In terms of the impact of gambling on the family, it means that we worry and we must ensure we keep on top of things, both mental and physical conditions too. This is obviously a growing problem for the country, and therefore the government and the key stakeholders must therefore look at gambling more holistically and provide greater funding, resources and legislation to manage and support this area of work. Otherwise, there is a serious risk of diluting the already limited support, and my mum's case shows the impact and pressure that gambling can have on the wider NHS, social care, etc. So you're moving pressures to those areas if you don't. Hopefully this shows that it can happen to anyone and that it can be complex to manage and support. I would like to end on a positive note, to say that my mum has not gambled since attending Gambling Harms Northwest, which is for over 3 years now. She seems much happier when attending this group and after finally getting the appropriate medical support which she needed, and we're all very proud of her. Finding the necessary support needs to be more readily available, easy to access, and capable of coping with the complexity or simplicity of the people in need of that help. And that's the story of the family journey for myself as a son of a mother who's had gambling issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Spencer. Again, just another powerful reminder of what it's like to be an affected other. We're going to move on now, and I'm going to ask Helen Rhodes from the Gambling Commission. Helen's the Programme Director for Safer Gambling Commission in the UK, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the work of the Commission and the strategies. Thanks, Helen.
Graham, thank you for that. My name is Helen Rhodes, as Graham said, and I work for the Gambling Commission, which is the national regulator for gambling. Just before I talk about the Gambling Commission's work and the national strategy and so on, I wanted to mention that I'm not an affected other because of gambling, but I am an affected other because of alcohol. And one of the things that I found hardest about that situation is the inability to talk about it with family and friends, because it wasn't my story, it was the story of my family member who was affected. And I think that's one of the most significant challenges that we face as a group and as a set of partners, to take forward work to really support people and to give them a voice. And my reason for saying that is just to set the scene for what we as the Gambling Commission are trying to do with partners. So Graham asked me to speak about the national strategy, which is a product, a tool that we have developed with partners to try and collaborate across the public sector and charities and organisations that are doing work to reduce gambling harm. It's not just about the Gambling Commission's role, it's about all of those partners. It has two strategic priorities of prevention and education and treatment and support. And at the launch, all of those partners came together to say it was really important and critical for the success of the strategy that people with lived experience were really at the heart of its delivery. But we all recognised at the time of launch that there were still significant gaps in this. Since then, I am pleased that there has been more progress in embedding people who really understand the issues that have affected people who are harmed by gambling directly or harmed by the experiences that they felt from family members, right at the heart of the programs. And we've seen that across prevention, across treatment, and specific projects. So I thought we'd mention a couple of examples of those, but then talk about what's happening now and what might happen next, because there are still challenges and some opportunities to do more. So on the prevention side, it's really clear that as the Gambling Commission, the most important thing is to try and prevent people being harmed from gambling in the first place. So it's the steps that we have taken are significant steps, but not complete. It is an ongoing process to try and understand whether the steps we've introduced are working, what else can be done, and what can be most effective. But it isn't just the gambling businesses that are changing. The financial sector is significantly changing too, and I'm really pleased to see that shift over the recent years to offer more tools and support. I find it really powerful to hear about the challenges of data protection holding things back. And this is where other regulators like the ICO can play a role in adapting the rules or giving guidance to businesses on how best to take account of these experiences. So here today, primarily in listening mode, to take away those inputs again, to feed into not just the Gambling Commission's work, but the work that we do with partners as well. I know today we have several local authorities listening in because of the significant programs of work that they are doing to try and build a community network of support and prevention initiatives across the whole piece. There are so many opportunities to embed gambling within support for families, from domestic abuse charities, suicide prevention work that's happening, as well as even things like housing support. All of these areas, if they are aware of gambling issues in their work, they can take action that doesn't need to be entirely separate and different. It's about embedding it and taking the opportunities to take that forward. We've seen some very good projects, examples led by people with lived experience, and I think those are having a real impact in decision making. One example to highlight is in Scotland, the work of the Health and Social Care Alliance. The Alliance in Scotland has launched a forum for people with lived experience. And whilst that has experienced challenges because of COVID, there are also opportunities, more opportunities for people to participate at a distance where they might have struggled to do so in the past. And I'm also really pleased to see some prevention initiatives that are led directly by people with lived experience, and many of them are on the conference listening in today, and that's a significant step forward, I feel. Where we are now, however, is that there is an expanding number of projects and initiatives, and the role of Partners to the National Strategy is to help collaborate and ensure that that activity is joined up and strategic, and that the lessons learned from each individual project are applied across the whole piece. So a significant thing that I'd like to mention today is the Gambling Commission's actions map under the national strategy, where we would ask all of those listening to try and make sure any work that you are doing is reflected on that actions map, so that people can take account of the work that you are doing to support people with lived experience, and particularly families and affected others as connected with today. I think that presents a real opportunity, if I'm honest. I think heading from here, the opportunities are for a number of these small projects to come together in a collaborative, structured approach to make sure that across the whole of Great Britain, there is coverage. But today, I am here primarily in listening mode to hear about these experiences and to take them away and feed back to my partners in the strategy. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Helen. I think it's a really interesting. It's really interesting that we've got you're having a call for people to contribute to the map. I think that's brilliant, and I think it's really interesting you picking up on the GDPR issue, and maybe we can talk about how regulators can link up together and information commissioners to probably help change. Really what I think was a good piece of legislation designed at protecting individual from big business using data inappropriately, whereas actually it has the perverse effect of actually causing additional harms to people that are already in a position of crisis when it's not used sensibly. So I think it just builds on the theme of today. I think where we have some emotional support, but there's some real practical issues that can really help change the damage that's being caused to the affected other by somebody else's gambling. And if we can be creative, and I'm sure with the right will, we can make changes so that it doesn't become even more of a difficult slog for people when they're at their lowest ebb. So thanks for that. I'm going to pass over to Terry, who's going to introduce our last person with lived experience, talking about their experiences.
Thank you, Graham. And this has had to be recorded because this young lady, Najrana, is working today. But Najrana is the partner of a problem gambler. She still lives with the problem gambler. However, she's from the BAME community, and so she has different restrictions and complexities that are specific to around her religious background, etc. So if we could now play the video of Najrana, and then we can listen to what she had to say. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Naj. I'm a wife of a gambler who have been married and living with a gambler for over 12 years without even realizing that it exists because it was so invisible. At the beginning, I struggled to come to terms with it because it's not something you hear a lot about. The whole situation made me feel really embarrassed, isolated, and obviously uneasy because I thought I had something to do with it. I didn't know where or who to turn, as I've never seen anywhere any signposting, advertisement. I didn't even know anyone in my friends or family circle with similar problems. At first, I thought the problem would disappear because I tried to ignore it as much as I could. But the deeper I got to the actual problem, and more I realized how much debt he kind of got us into. It's tremendous, really, because we'd fallen behind so much with the mortgage payment. So we were on the verge of losing our home. Essential bills had fallen behind. So we had like court proceedings and stuff going on. I even had to remove my children from all the extracurricular activities because like private tuition, which they desperately needed, but I couldn't afford it. Even like swimming lessons was unaffordable. This made me really, really sad, trapped, even frustrated, causing me to feel nothing but hopelessness because I thought there's no way I can get out of this. So obviously out of my frustration, I decided to search online to see what's available. And there was a lot more for the actual gambler than those affected by it. But after a lot of research, and I came across website which I contacted. They did assessment over the phone and referred me to Beacon Counselling. Obviously, I didn't think they were going to be able to help me in the way that I wanted because I come from Asian cultural background, and the way things work in our culture can be very difficult compared to the white British culture. Obviously, after coming to terms with the fact that my other half was a compulsive gambler, things got a bit difficult from then on, as he didn't have a job. So paying 400k debt and a massive mortgage was like a massive burden on our heads. This obviously causes behavior to change because it's difficult to live with him. So I tried getting help with housing so I could move out, obviously for our safety, for mine and the children's safety, because I had people knocking on the door like silly hours of the night asking me to return the money, to obviously let them in. Like one of the women threatened to burn the house down if I didn't open the door with me and my children in it. And it was a scary time because he decided to, because of all these people threatening him at the same time, he decided to move out to his mum's, leaving me with the kids at home. And these kind of people to deal with. So it was really scary for me and the kids. You know, I was kind of left alone with these issues. I tried to attend the local council as well to see if I can get housing, but I flatly got refused because I already have a name on a property, the one that we're living in right now. And getting a job, fending for the kids and the mortgage was nearly impossible with 3 kids under 9. Obviously, when I attended Beacon counselling session, they helped me. They changed the way I thought about the whole situation. They helped me to tackle one thing at a time, and obviously they made me realize how I will tackle these things and how I will go about making the changes myself. I was also referred to Friday sessions through Beacon Counselling with Terry, which I found it very helpful, although my husband didn't feel comfortable because the sessions were held at church, plus we were the only Muslim couples, Asian couples there, which made us both uncomfortable at first. But after a few sessions, my partner stopped coming because he didn't find it useful, but I continued to attend the session because I thought I could always take something away. I tried accessing the local community centres as well to see what's out there because they tend to help women out more often. So, but I couldn't find anything there either. There was no signposting or anything to see where I could get help from. And obviously, this also had a negative effect on his health as well as ours because the whole getting into massive debt obviously kind of hit him, saying he's got a lot of debts to pay, so it caused him a lot of anxiety issues, which caused him to have his health just spiraled out of control because he had heart attack, he had angina attacks, he ended up having within like a year he ended up having a triple bypass surgery. Obviously it had a negative impact on us as well because we were losing income. Every time he went into a hospital, he stopped working, we had no income coming in. And obviously we were, you know, I struggled with the kids mentally as well because then I'm having to look after him and the kids. So, you know, it's this gambling kind of took his health away as well. Obviously coming to deal with this problem, I did learn that there were a lot of people within our Asian community who's got a lot of gamblers out there, but the families do not know how to deal with it and they try to hide it just like his family did. So the gambler keeps on gambling and families keep on bailing them out or even eventually disowning them. And there is not a lot of help and support for the families out there. Like I said, it took me quite a lot of searching in order for me to get what I am today. And obviously contacts as well. I didn't know where to go and who to talk to, so I think that's where we're lacking. And obviously, especially in our Asian community, gambling in our Asian community is seen as a bad habit which needs to be kicked with the right help and support spiritually by praying. But families need support to understand and realize that gambling is not a habit where one day you wake up and think, right, I'm going to stop tomorrow. But it's actually it's an actual illness, just like cancer, you know, just like any other illnesses, just not physically seen. And that's why maybe it's ignored. This is my journey.
Again, I think there's not a lot to say really, just another great insight into how somebody else's gambling can have a real detrimental and negative effect on their families, friends and colleagues. We're going to move on now to our second international speaker, and I think although people won't be able to see it, I think we should give Jess a bit of a clap because I believe it's stupid o'clock in Canada. When I last spoke to her, it was about 5 to 5, I think. So it's really early. Jess is the evaluation lead at GRIO, and she oversees the evaluation and capacity building program in support of the national strategy. GRIO, for those that don't know, is an independent knowledge translation and exchange organisation with almost 20 years of international experience in generating, synthesising and mobilising research and making the research into action across health and wellbeing sectors. And Jess is going to speak to us about the international perspective. Thanks, Jess.
Thanks, Graham. So what I wanted to talk about today was, examples of really strong prevention activities to support affected others. I wanted to bring to the table, examples of cross-sector partnerships and strategies that we're really looking at earlier identification of individuals affected by gambling harm, and policies and procedures and regulations that could be put into place to prevent those harms from occurring in the first place. However, as you can guess, discussions around affected others, particularly from a prevention standpoint, is pretty underrepresented. It's definitely an area that needs further consideration. And although I'm disappointed I can't speak a lot about the prevention piece today, I'm going to speak more about internationally what we see as being effective for treatment and support for affected others. I hope in a way that's a kind of a call to action, what Neil mentioned as he kicked off the conference today, talking about how we know that there's probably enough to get going and there is a real need. So I just want to kind of start by prefacing that as I was listening to the affected others speak, particularly when I listened to Nicola and talking about all the financial harms and where are those opportunities to put those safeguards in place in advance so that affected others don't ever get to the point where they have to face financial ruin as a result of their loved one. When we look at affected others seeking treatment and support, they are very underrepresented as a total group, which is really perplexing because as a whole, they represent over half of the total burden of gambling harm. So when we think about a population and individuals and where all these harms are occurring, over half are at the affected other level. So a lot of our conversations tend to be around the gambler, of course, but we really need to make sure that we're always having that wider lens of who else is affected by that sort of trickle effect. For those that do seek treatment and support, it's primarily women under 40 who live with a male gambler, which begs the question, what is it about that group that makes them more likely to seek treatment and support? And conversely, where are the gaps where we're missing so many other types of affected others who would benefit from treatment and support? Of course, as you heard today, affected others are not a homogenous group. They have, similarities in their stories, but they have really unique and diverse needs. So when we're thinking about treatment and supports that will be useful to these groups, we need to make sure that we're not brushing them with a broad stroke. We're really making sure that we think about the different needs for those different groups. In particular, there's a couple different ways of looking at treatment and support for affected others. There can be the supports that are more gambler focused. Those are the ones that help the affected other help the gambler through their journey. There are supports and services that are more affected other in nature, irrespective of the actual gambler. And of course, there's a blended model of the two options. And although there hasn't been extensive research to understand what the needs of affected others are, the research that has been done has shown that there is variation in the actual preferences of affected others and what types of supports they want to receive. So that's just something to keep in mind as we're planning what the opportunities to strengthen supports and treatment in Great Britain. In terms of how we tend to see these supports and services offered, they're primarily offered online, and that isn't necessarily specific to the pandemic at all. That's kind of been the case for the last 5 to 10 years, and the reason for that is it's very hard to identify and reach affected others. So these online modes of communication can be really an effective strategy to cast that wide, broad net and reach a lot of people. There are two sort of ways to think about offering services and treatment and support. There is the kind of lower intensity options. These are websites, work like online modules. These are things that affected others can pick up and put down at any time. They would consist of resources for dealing with financial harm, but also coping and stress and other areas of their mental well-being. These actually, for the most part, seem to meet the needs of most affected others. But of course, we do know that there are many affected others that need more treatment and support. However, that website, that broad education campaign can be such an effective way of reaching the affected others and letting them know that more extensive treatment and services exist. There is one program I want to just sort of highlight today as a case study, which I think is kind of interesting. There's a program of work in Germany called Don't Gamble with My Life. So there's a knowledge translation organization that actually took an effective a program that was found to be studied and effective in reducing the negative mental health implications for affected others. And it was delivered in person, I think over 8 to 10 sessions. So what they said is, okay, we know this works in person, but we're pretty limited in how many people we can reach and serve this way. So what would it look like to take what we know works and adapt it to an online setting where we can reach more people? And that's where this website, Don't Gamble with My Life, which is roughly the German translation, so don't hold me exactly to that. I don't speak German, came about. And this program of work has Don't Gamble with My Life, or Don't Gamble My Life Away, which is a website that has resources for both the gambler and the affected other, as well as a stream of services and supports called Don't Play With My Life, again, roughly translated, specifically for relatives and affected others. And there was some research done to look at, who is actually using those resources, and they found that over 2/3 of affected others that use those resources return to the website and those modules multiple times. And over 1/3 actually completed all of the modules, which are, like I said, those kind of increasing coping skills, resilience, and signposting to more supports in other areas. And that participation of 1/3 completing all of the modules is actually on par with other e-mental health initiatives. So that's really promising. The reason I wanted to bring that up is because I think that's a really good way of thinking of how can we take a strengths-based approach where we say, what do we already know is working? What are our partnerships that are already in place? Because one of the reasons that this Don't Play With My Life for the affected others was so successful in driving traffic to the website was all of those existing partnerships in place with different service providers. So what can we take that's already working? What can we leverage that we're already doing well and adapt and scale up? So even though, of course, we need to talk about the significant harms to affected others, and it's a very serious topic, I hope that we can also have that positive light of knowing that there is so much great work already being done in Great Britain. And hopefully it's a matter of harnessing that and making that into a really strategic plan so that we can have the impact that we're looking to have. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Jess. That was really useful. We've had some we've had a request for you to share any links that you have to some of those things. So I wonder if you could send it to us at some stage, and we'll make sure that it goes out with the post webinar information. Thanks very much, Jess. What I'm going to do now is there's been some when people signed up for the webinar, we asked people to send questions in advance because we knew this was a very busy agenda and schedule. And so thanks to those that have sent questions in advance, I'm going to go through those as many as possible. And looking at the time, we'll see we'll see how many we can get done. I'm going to ask the questions and then direct it at the panel members. So I wonder if Spencer and Anna can put on their cameras, and we'll start with the first one. This is a bit of an amalgamation question, and it's, how does gambling addiction affect children whose parents have the addiction? And I'm particularly interested as an affected in being a child of an affected other and better understanding their support needs. So any thought on this would be helpful. So I wondered if Spencer could give a bit of an insight on what he think could be helpful, and and if Nicola could talk about the impacts on her children.
Yes, do you want me to go?
Yes, please, Spencer, that'd be great.
I suppose looking back for me, as the child of a mum who's had serious gambling difficulties, the worries were always around the support not being there, the length of time it actually takes to even try to get pointed in the right direction. And also the worry about the key stakeholders all knowing what the other ones do and speaking to each other when appropriate. In my experience, it was only, and bear in mind there were underlying clinical conditions which impacted my mum's conditions. It was only when I really stamped my feet and when something went wrong, e.g. the suicide attempt, when everything came together. So I think it's important that that's dealt with, from the child of the gambler. It would be really good to know that there's a clear map about what happens when you're going through such difficulties, and it covers all aspects. So it tells you what support's there in terms of Gambling Harms Northwest, but also how to deal with the underlying clinical conditions in my own mum's case. And I think if you have that map and you know that the resources are there, which is critical, then you would feel much more assured as the child and a family member of, one of your loved ones who's been severely affected. So that's been the main worry from the, child of a gambler, as well as obviously, the more emotional stuff where you kind of worry about the impact of the gambling on your parents' marriage. Obviously, my dad has to live with my mum day to day during those difficulties. So what was the impact on my father? And obviously, it's just very upsetting for all her kids and all her grandkids to have seen the kind of mental impact on our mum and grandmother, and even having to go in hospital several times after the suicide attempts. So for her grandkids to have to go in and see that hasn't been very nice. But I think the key thing that would be helpful to have is making sure that there's a clear map, and then critically that the resources are there to support that, and in a timely manner. That would be my view.
Thanks, Spencer. And Nicola, are you okay to
Yeah.
give an opinion on what you think's happening for your kids?
I think it's a wider conversation again, isn't it? Because one of the things, I had to do it from so many different angles, and actually having those conversations with the children at times. Mine are 6 and 7. So for a time, the reality was they didn't see their dad. A constant figure from their life was removed, and they were subject to some of that. And how, as Jackie taught, how as a mother, you never want to put your children in those kind of circumstances. You're there to protect them, and ultimately their dad probably did too. So one of them has suffered with anxiety as a result of that. She's had learning mental support from school. But for me, it's about how, moving forward, I have that conversation and how I develop that over time, and also never putting any of the responsibility of this gambling related harms back on them, for them to start feeling the very, very emotions that we've talked here today. That's vital for me. And I try not to live in the fear of it, but Neil pointed it out at the beginning. One of my other obviously great worries is will I one day be the mother of a gambling addict? And that's the one that gets me more than anything, I think. Sorry.
No, thank you, Nicola. Thank you, and thanks for sharing that insight. I think talking therapies for the affected other, and again, hats off to GamCare for being visionary in being able to fund the support for talking therapies for people affected by problem gambling. But there's a whole host of other interventions and help that we need to provide in financial, legal, and even some help with early intervention on family therapies as well. I think there's a package to be made that will protect us for the future. So thanks guys for that. The next question is one for Helen, and it's what if any are the plans in the national strategy to support innovation in terms of gambling related harms concerning affected others?
Happy to take that one. Bit slow to react there, sorry. Yes, the national strategy, as I said, it's really important that all the individual initiatives now come together in a structured approach. I think we're seeing a lot of interest from charities who are working in other fields and supporting people who are affected others. So for example, working with families in the drugs or alcohol field, where they are now receiving questions from parents or family members about gambling, and they are looking to build up their capacity to support people. And what we'd really like to see is a collaboration of all these different projects coming together to develop a strategy as a whole for provision for affected others. The Gambling Commission's role in that is partially through the process of approving funds through use from regulatory settlements, which means that we have some role to support funding. And we are interested in this area and in bringing together those organisations that can both work in the gambling specific field, but also build in gambling into other areas of support like mental health, drugs, alcohol, domestic abuse, to make a structured approach where gambling appears everywhere it needs to. So that is our priority.
Thanks, Helen. The next question, and I think this one is a great challenge for us. Actually, it's a great challenge. It's a significant challenge. And this question is really for Anna at GamCare and Neil at Beacon. And the question is, have you any advice on how to support a family member who has autism, ADHD to stop gambling? I think that's quite a challenging question for people with additional needs.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can make a start on that if you like, and perhaps Neil might want to add to it. Yes, there's lots of people with a wide range of additional needs actually in the areas you've mentioned, autism and ADHD, but also with more complex mental health issues or other health conditions. And I think the answer to this is that it depends a bit on the presentation. So for some people, those conditions are very well managed and have less impact on their day-to-day life. And for other people, they have huge impacts on their day-to-day life and family life as well. And within the National Gambling Treatment System, we've got very good and clear arrangements in place to ensure that people are in the right service to meet their needs. So for those with more complex presentations, whether it's autism, ADHD or other complexities, there are NHS clinics available who are specialists at working with people who have additional complexities. And that would be the most appropriate place for those people to be seen. Within the GamCare and the partner network that we're part of, if those additional difficulties are very well managed and are having fairly minimal impacts on the gambling, then it may be that we can see in those services. But what happens for the person coming forward is that they may phone the helpline first, they may go straight to a local service, but either way there'll be a thorough exploring of needs. So at your first appointment, it's about going through all of those issues that are affecting you, looking at things in the round, and by gathering that information, that helps us to make informed decisions with the individual, not for them, about the best place for their care to progress. Neil, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I completely endorse what you've said, Anna. I think the starting point to this is about, within the family unit, is about extending that, what we would class as a constant invitation, an invitation to access services. And at the point at which they access services, I think we can reassure individuals that they will, at that point of access, that they get a full comprehensive assessment. And then we work on an integrated basis with other organisations, including the NHS, to put a care plan together and to support that individual going forward. But the most important thing is about that invitation and to get them to access services.
Thank you. And I think, looking at the time, I think this will be the last question we have time for, and it's do you find that after a certain amount of time, gamblers are less likely to gamble again? My partner hits his 3-year milestone this weekend, but we always fear he could gamble again. So I wonder if this is. I wonder if Jess has any insight on the statistics around there, and I wonder whether Anna could put a little bit of an insight into the gambling network experience. So Jess.
Sure. Yeah. So after a year post-treatment, approximately the range is approximately 40 to 50% of gamblers remain abstinent. But it's important to note that those who do return to gambling, only half, so it's kind of 50-50, necessarily experience symptoms of a gambling disorder. So it's not the case that just because someone returns to gambling that they'll necessarily go back to experiencing harms, depending on their own goals and their recovery journey, but probably around 40 to 50% remain abstinent after a year. And then after that, some people do return to gambling. The good news is that most of that return to gambling usually occurs in the first 6 months after treatment. So it's less likely as time goes on that someone will return. But of course, that's always a possibility.
Thank you. Anna.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the research evidence that Jess has just talked about reflects what we see in practice. I think, all addiction by its very nature is a relapsing condition. There is always that concern that problems can resurface. But the longer people are able to maintain abstinence or recovery, the more practice they get at using those skills, and the more embedded in somebody's life that gets. It becomes more normal not to gamble than to gamble. And so in that sense, it probably does get easier over time. But nonetheless, especially depending on the reasons that somebody's gambling, it's something to be vigilant for, I guess. If you've had problems in the past, it's about just being alert to the situations that could potentially lead to that in the future. But I don't think it's something that people have to be defined by going forward if they don't want to. Some people do want to be, and that's fine. People's journeys through treatment and into recovery are very, very varied. And I think it's a broad church, and there's room for quite a range of views and experiences. But broadly speaking, it does seem to get easier over time.
And of course, the helpline, the free helpline, is always available for those people that are concerned about that as well, isn't it? And the local partners network, we're available for people to head anything off at the pass if people feel that urge.
Absolutely, and as you all know really well, during COVID, we've done lots of work to recontact people who've completed treatment just to help them maintain those treatment gains. But yeah, just picking up the phone. I mean, the great thing is that once people have had some support in any form, they know how to access it, and hopefully have had a good experience of that. So yeah, definitely just pick up the phone, start a live chat, contact your local service or worker. I wouldn't hesitate.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I think that's there were several other questions, but I don't think, looking at the clock, and if we want to finish on time, I don't think we've got time for any more. So thanks to all the panel members there for answering those questions. I'm just now going to hand over to Terry to introduce Nicola again, just to have a word. We're proud that we've had so many people from the Gambling Harms North West Alliance speaking about the intimate details to over 200 strangers on this call for sharing an insight, and the feedback has already been fantastic about the stories and how insightful it's been, and how people are gonna think about what goes on in the way forward. But I'd like to hand over to Terry now.
Yeah, thanks for that, Graham. If somebody could put my picture back up, that would be appreciated. But yeah, I'm sure everybody can hear me anyway. I was going to tell you about my own personal experiences, but looking at the time factor now, I will keep it brief. And so what I'm actually going to talk about is today are affected others leading this challenge. We aim to give 4.3 million experiencing harm today, plus those at risk in the future, a voice. We also want that voice to be listened to and acted upon. We want to create and provide almost like a one-stop shop servicing to provide education, individualized triage, support and mentorship, utilizing anything from debt management, counseling, abuse, legal or criminal advice. The effect can be a ripple effect right through to a tsunami effect that they experience, as we've heard today. We will work collaborative with other groups, individuals, practitioners, specialists, locally, nationally, and obviously now internationally. Here is the opportunity for you and me to give those people a voice. And I will now hand it over to Nicola for the final few words. Thank you, Nicola.
Thank you. I mean, from my perspective, just a massive thank you once to all the panel today, but more importantly, everybody that actually signed up to this, because when we first started in the chat, it was having this platform was something that I've been passionate about for a very, very, very long time. I could speak for hours on the situations and the scenarios that actually brought me where we are today. And this is just my story. Beyond me, I haven't touched into how it impacted my in-laws, my own parents, to whom it's both cost their retirement plans, and beyond that, the siblings. So from my own story, and speaking probably for many other families, that this 6 to 10 figure is not made up, it's not plucked out of anywhere, it has significant impact. I've never owned a betting account, but I and too many like me are paying such a massive price. And as you've heard from everybody who's so kindly given up their time, the cost is great financially, emotionally, legally, physically, mentally. But I think one of the big factors is time. It's so costly in time. And if this year is anything to prove, it's how valuable that is now more than ever. And the reason now is the time to give the wider impact of gambling harms the attention it really deserves. And so I'm really pleased that there's this positive movement and a much wider collective beyond here identifying and now looking at all the missing links. And just from this point forward, we're just dedicated to driving solutions. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you very much. Thanks to all our contributors today. I think it's been brilliant. So thank you very much. I started off by sharing a tale that was a story that was told to us by an affected other, and how they felt they were guilty by association. Even though they weren't, and guilt's a very emotive word to use, but that was the feeling. That was the sense of it. And I said that this story was told to us and was unique to that person, and that's absolutely true. But all of the issues that are highlighted today, as we can see, are systematic. There's systematic problems that affected others face. And they're all too common. We've heard lots of them today with a similar theme. We're proud to be part of this this webinar at ARA and at Beacon, and we are using this, as we always do, as a call for action. Talking therapies are brilliant, and as I said, you know, GamCare's insight in looking at that for being able to provide funding for that for a number of years is absolutely fantastic. But alongside the talking therapies, we need to think of a holistic package of practical and systematic help, and also to be able to collect the data and challenges so that we can help other regulators, the Commission, but other regulators as well, the Information Commissioner's Office, and the bank regulation, to be able to change processes so that people that are, as the person spoke to us before, felt like being hit by a truck, who had no idea and knew nothing about what was happening, are not facing additional burdens when they're trying to sort their lives out, that of their families, and to keep a roof over their head. So we're using this as a call for action. We are delighted that we can use this as a platform for looking at innovation and to build hubs where we can work in partnership with other appropriate agencies, as Helen was saying, and we can start providing education, awareness and practical support. We've come in 3 minutes early, which is fantastic. I'd like to thank everybody for attendance, and just to remind you that people will be getting a link post-conference where there's a short evaluation form. It'll be on the Eventbrite link, and the short evaluation form, and a link to the recording of this. So thank you all for attending. Thank you very, very much, and have a great day.